Hello friends. My name is Nickel, and today I'm going to tell you a story which will make you think. So let's start. In the heart of Antwerp stood one of the most important centers of the global diamond industry. For decades, the city had been known as the diamond capital of the world, with billions of dollars worth of precious stones passing through its markets every year. At the center of this glittering empire was the highly fortified Antwerp Diamond Center, a building designed to protect some of the most valuable treasures on Earth. The vault inside the Diamond Center was considered virtually impenetrable. Security experts believed it was among the safest vaults ever constructed. Multiple layers of protection stood between any thief and the diamonds stored within. Motion sensors monitored every movement. Heat detectors searched for unusual temperature changes. Magnetic field sensors guarded the doors. High-resolution surveillance cameras watched every corridor 24 hours a day. Reinforced steel doors and sophisticated locks added yet another obstacle. To most people, breaking into such a vault seemed impossible. But one man saw it differently. His name was Leonardo Notarbartolo, an experienced Italian thief with a reputation for patience, intelligence, and meticulous planning. Unlike criminals who relied on violence or impulsive decisions, Notarbartolo approached crime like a professional strategist. He believed that every security system, no matter how advanced, had weaknesses waiting to be discovered. Years before the heist would make headlines around the world, Notarbartolo began studying the Antwerp Diamond District. He carefully observed how the businesses operated, how security personnel worked, and how valuable goods moved through the area. He understood that defeating the vault would not be about brute force, it would be about understanding every detail of the system protecting it. His plan required something most criminals lacked: time. Rather than rushing into action, Notarbartolo decided to infiltrate the building from the inside. He rented a legitimate office in the Antwerp Diamond Center, presenting himself as a respectable Italian diamond merchant. The disguise was convincing. He dressed professionally, spoke the language of the trade, and conducted himself like a genuine businessman. For more than a year, nobody suspected him. The office gave him exactly what he needed: access. Day after day, he walked through the same hallways as real diamond traders. He observed employees, security guards, maintenance workers, and visitors. He learned which doors were used most frequently, when guards changed shifts, and which procedures were followed routinely. Every observation was stored away like a piece of a giant puzzle. While others saw a secure building, Notarbartolo saw a map of opportunities. He paid special attention to the vault itself. Although he could not simply walk inside and examine every security device, he gradually gathered information about the systems protecting it. He studied access procedures, monitored employee habits, and searched for any vulnerabilities that might be overlooked by security professionals. The deeper he investigated, the more ambitious his plan became. Soon he realized he could not accomplish the operation alone. The complexity of the task required specialists, people with unique skills capable of overcoming the vault's sophisticated defenses. One by one, he assembled a carefully selected crew. Among them was an expert lockpicker, capable of defeating advanced locking mechanisms. Another member specialized in electronic systems and alarms, understanding how security devices functioned and how they might be neutralized. A third member handled logistics, transportation, and escape planning, ensuring that every stage of the operation would run smoothly. Each person was chosen for a specific purpose. This was not a gang of reckless criminals. It was a team of professionals preparing for what would become one of the most daring thefts in modern history. As months passed, the group met secretly to discuss strategies and contingency plans. They analyzed blueprints, rehearsed procedures, and anticipated every possible obstacle. If one method failed, they prepared alternatives. If security changed, they adapted their plans. The operation began to resemble a military campaign more than a robbery. Notarbartolo often described the challenge as a game of chess.
Every move had to be calculated years in advance. One mistake could trigger alarms, attract police attention, or send the entire crew to prison. Yet despite the risks, confidence grew within the team. The more they studied the Antwerp Diamond Center, the more convinced they became that even the world's most secure vault could be beaten. What they didn't know was that their greatest challenge wasn't getting inside the vault, it was escaping afterwards without leaving a single clue behind.
For more than a year, Leonardo Notarbartolo and his crew had studied every aspect of the Antwerp Diamond Center. They knew that success would depend not on speed or force, but on patience and precision. The vault they intended to rob was considered one of the most secure in the world, protected by layers of technology specifically designed to stop even the most sophisticated criminals. At the center of the facility stood the massive vault door, a symbol of security that many believed was impossible to breach. The door itself was reinforced steel and protected by a highly complex locking system. Security experts claimed that the lock had more than 100 million possible combinations, making random attempts virtually impossible. But Notarbartolo never intended to guess. The crew spent months gathering information about the vault's defenses. Every sensor, every alarm, and every security procedure was carefully analyzed. The vault was protected by infrared heat detectors that could sense body temperature. Seismic sensors were designed to detect vibrations from drilling, cutting, or other attempts to force entry. Magnetic field sensors monitored whether the vault door had been tampered with. Motion detectors stood ready to trigger alarms if unusual activity occurred. To most criminals, the security system looked unbeatable. To Notarbartolo's team, it looked like a puzzle. Using the access he had gained through his office in the building, Notarbartolo quietly collected information piece by piece. The crew used miniature cameras, hidden observation techniques, and carefully planned reconnaissance missions to study the locking mechanisms and security procedures. Their goal was not to destroy the security system. Their goal was to understand it. As the months passed, they began creating detailed replicas of certain components. They practiced opening similar locks, tested different methods for bypassing sensors, and rehearsed every stage of the operation. Each member of the crew knew exactly what they would do once the heist began. There would be no improvisation. Every second inside the vault had been planned long before they ever stepped through its door. Finally, after years of preparation, the team selected the perfect opportunity. The weekend of February 14th to 16th, 2003. Valentine's Day weekend offered a critical advantage. Many businesses would be closed, reducing activity inside the building and lowering the chance that someone would unexpectedly discover the operation. The crew believed they would have enough time to enter, complete the theft, and disappear before anyone realized what had happened. As darkness settled over Antwerp, the thieves moved into position. One by one, they entered the building using methods that avoided drawing attention. Their equipment had been carefully prepared and tested. Every tool had a specific purpose. Inside the facility, they began confronting the security systems they had spent years studying. The infrared sensors were neutralized using techniques designed to prevent them from detecting body heat. Alarm components were carefully disabled without triggering alerts. The crew used custom-built equipment created specifically for the operation, allowing them to bypass systems that security engineers believed were foolproof. Each step carried enormous risk. A single mistake could activate the alarm network and bring police rushing to the scene. But the team remained calm. Months of preparation paid off as one security layer after another was quietly defeated. The thieves moved deeper into the building until they finally stood before the vault door itself. For a moment, they faced the challenge that had inspired years of planning. The enormous steel door loomed in front of them. Beyond it lay millions of dollars in diamonds, gold, cash, and jewelry belonging to dealers from around the world. The crew began the final stage of their operation. Using their knowledge of the locking mechanisms and the replicas they had practiced with for months, they carefully worked through the security procedures. The process required patience and absolute concentration.
Minutes felt like hours. Every sound inside the building seemed amplified. Then, at last, the mechanism responded. The vault door slowly opened. The team had accomplished what many believed was impossible. They stepped inside one of the most secure vaults on Earth. Rows of safety deposit boxes surrounded them. Behind each door were fortunes in diamonds, precious gems, gold, and luxury jewelry. The value of the contents was staggering, far beyond anything the thieves had ever encountered before. For a brief moment, they stood in the very heart of the global diamond trade. Years of planning had brought them to this exact point. Now came the most dangerous part of all, taking the treasure and escaping before anyone discovered that the world's most secure vault had been breached.
With the vault door finally opened, Leonardo Notarbartolo and his crew stood inside what many considered the most secure treasure chamber in Europe. Years of planning, surveillance, and preparation had led to this moment. Around them were rows of safety deposit boxes containing fortunes in diamonds, gold, jewelry, and luxury watches belonging to some of the world's wealthiest diamond traders. But even now, the thieves knew their greatest enemy wasn't security, it was evidence. The early 2000s marked a new era in criminal investigations. Advances in forensic science meant that a single fingerprint, a strand of hair, or even microscopic traces of DNA could lead investigators directly to a suspect. Notarbartolo understood this better than most criminals. The crew had prepared extensively to avoid leaving anything behind. Each member wore multiple layers of clothing designed to prevent hairs, skin particles, or fibers from falling onto the crime scene. Gloves alone were not considered sufficient protection. To further reduce the possibility of fingerprints, some members purportedly coated their fingertips with adhesive materials, creating an additional barrier between themselves and any surface they touched. Every movement inside the vault was deliberate. They avoided touching walls unnecessarily. Tools were carefully handled and accounted for. The crew treated the operation almost like a surgical procedure, constantly aware that even the smallest mistake could destroy years of planning. Once inside, they turned their attention to the safety deposit boxes. The vault contained approximately 160 boxes rented by diamond dealers and wealthy clients. Opening them required patience, specialized tools, and a methodical approach. The thieves worked quickly but carefully, moving from one box to the next. As each compartment opened, valuable items began to emerge. Loose diamonds sparkled under the vault lights. Bags filled with precious stones were removed and packed. Gold bars and jewelry disappeared into waiting containers. Expensive watches worth tens of thousands of dollars each were collected alongside rare gems. The deeper they went, the more astonishing the haul became. Every box seemed to contain another fortune. Some held investment-grade diamonds. Others contained family collections of jewelry accumulated over generations. There were gemstones so rare that their true value would be difficult to estimate, even years later. The thieves continued their work for hours. One after another, deposit boxes were emptied. By the time they finished, more than 100 of the 160 safety deposit boxes had been opened and stripped of their contents. Estimates of the stolen property varied widely, but many reports placed the value of the haul at well over $100 million, making it one of the largest diamond thefts in history. Despite the incredible value surrounding them, the crew remained disciplined. There was no celebration, no unnecessary conversation. Every member understood that they were still inside the most dangerous phase of the operation. With the loot secured, the team began preparing to leave. The same precision that had brought them into the vault would now be required to get them out. They retraced their route through the building, carefully ensuring that security systems remained undisturbed. The alarms they had neutralized stayed silent. The sensors detected nothing unusual. Surveillance measures that were supposed to expose intruders remained unaware of the crime that had just occurred. As they exited the building, Antwerp slept peacefully. No sirens echoed through the streets.
No security guards rushed toward the vault. No one suspected that one of the most valuable robberies in modern history had just placed. The thieves disappeared into the night, carrying a fortune. For the rest of the weekend, the Antwerp Diamond District remained completely unaware. Saturday passed, then Sunday. Business owners, traders, and security personnel continued their routines without realizing that their vault had already been emptied. The illusion of security remained intact. But on Monday morning, everything changed. Employees arrived at the Antwerp Diamond Center, expecting an ordinary start to the work week. As they moved through the building, nothing initially seemed unusual. Then, someone reached the vault. What they saw was almost impossible to comprehend. The massive vault doors stood open. Inside, safety deposit boxes had been forced open and emptied. Drawers hung partially open. Precious stones, jewelry cases, and valuables were gone. The scene looked unreal. Within minutes, panic spread throughout the building. Police were called immediately. Investigators arriving at the scene struggled to understand what they were seeing. The vault had been considered nearly impenetrable. Security experts had long believed that its layers of protection made a successful robbery impossible. Yet somehow, someone had entered, defeated every major security system, stolen an enormous fortune, and vanished without triggering a single alarm. The scale and sophistication of the crime stunned authorities. News of the robbery spread rapidly across Belgium and then around the world. Journalists described it as a masterpiece of criminal planning. Security professionals questioned how such an advanced facility could have been compromised. At first glance, it appeared that the thieves had committed the perfect crime. There were no obvious suspects, no immediate witnesses, no alarm records, no clear explanation of how the vault had been breached. For a brief moment, it seemed that Leonardo Notarbartolo and his crew had achieved the impossible. But somewhere outside Antwerp, hidden among discarded materials from the operation, a tiny mistake had already been made. And that mistake would soon begin unraveling the greatest diamond heist in history.
When employees discovered the emptied vault on February 17, 2003, panic quickly spread through the Antwerp Diamond District. Within hours, the scene was flooded with police officers, forensic specialists, and security experts. What they found seemed almost impossible. One of the most secure vaults in the world had been robbed. More than 100 safety deposit boxes had been emptied. Millions of dollars in diamonds, gold, jewelry, and luxury watches had vanished. And yet, there were almost no obvious clues. Belgian investigators immediately launched one of the largest criminal investigations in the country's history. Detectives worked around the clock, interviewing witnesses, examining security footage, and reconstructing every moment leading up to the robbery. The deeper they looked, the stranger the case became. There were no smashed doors, no broken locks, no signs of a violent break-in, no alarm records indicating that intruders had entered the vault. Even more frustrating for investigators, the crime scene contained almost no usable fingerprints. The thieves had clearly understood modern forensic techniques and had taken extraordinary precautions to avoid leaving evidence behind. To many detectives, the robbery seemed too sophisticated to have been carried out by outsiders alone. Someone appeared to know the building intimately. Someone seemed to understand the security systems better than they should have. As a result, investigators began exploring the possibility of an inside job. They examined employees, security personnel, maintenance workers, and anyone else who had regular access to the building. Every person connected to the Antwerp Diamond Center became a potential suspect. But despite months of work, investigators struggled to identify a breakthrough. The thieves had planned almost everything perfectly. Almost. While detectives were searching the crime scene, another team began examining areas outside Antwerp where the thieves might have traveled after the robbery. Investigators believed that the thieves would have needed a place to dispose of equipment, clothing, and other materials connected to the operation. That theory eventually led to a remarkable discovery.
In a wooded area outside the city, investigators found a discarded bag of garbage. At first glance, it seemed insignificant, but inside were items that would completely change the direction of the investigation. The bag contained materials believed to be connected to the robbery, including tools, packaging, and other discarded objects. Among the contents was something surprisingly ordinary, part of a sandwich that someone had eaten and thrown away. To most people, it looked like trash. To forensic investigators, it was potential evidence. The sandwich contained traces of DNA. As laboratory technicians analyzed the biological material, detectives continued examining the contents of the garbage bag. They also discovered paperwork and receipts that provided valuable information about purchases connected to the gang's activities. The evidence began forming a trail that the thieves had never intended to leave behind. The DNA profile extracted from the sandwich was compared against available records and investigative leads. Combined with information obtained from receipts and other materials, detectives gradually narrowed their list of suspects. Their attention soon focused on a man who had spent years inside the Antwerp Diamond Center, pretending to be a legitimate businessman, Leonardo Notarbartolo. As investigators dug into his background, they discovered his connection to an office inside the building. The more they learned, the more suspicious he appeared. Notarbartolo had enjoyed unusual access to the facility.
He had spent years studying the building, and he fit the profile of someone capable of organizing a highly sophisticated criminal operation. The evidence continued to grow. Eventually, Belgian authorities moved in. Notarbartolo was arrested and questioned extensively. Investigators then worked to identify and connect other members of the crew, slowly uncovering the network behind the heist. The man who had spent years building the perfect plan now found himself at the center of one of Europe's most famous criminal investigations. During questioning and later legal proceedings, Notarbartolo offered a surprising explanation. According to him, the robbery was not exactly what it appeared to be. He claimed that he had been hired by a wealthy diamond merchant to stage the operation. In his version of events, the theft was supposedly part of an elaborate insurance fraud scheme rather than a traditional robbery. He suggested that certain individuals within the diamond trade had secretly arranged the operation, and that the stolen valuables were never intended to disappear permanently. It was a sensational allegation. If true, it would have transformed the case from a daring robbery into a massive financial conspiracy. However, investigators were unable to prove the claim. No definitive evidence showing that a diamond merchant had hired Notarbartolo to carry out the heist. Many detectives believed the story was simply an attempt to reduce his personal responsibility for the crime. The truth remains a subject of debate. What is certain is that a large portion of the stolen diamonds was never recovered. Despite years of investigation, countless searches, and international cooperation between law enforcement agencies, much of the treasure simply vanished. Some investigators believe the diamonds were quickly sold through underground networks. Others suspect they were broken up, recut, and mixed into legitimate markets, making them virtually impossible to trace. Whatever happened to them, millions of dollars worth of gems disappeared forever. In the end, the Antwerp Diamond Heist became one of the most famous robberies in modern history, not because the thieves successfully defeated an incredible security system, but because their downfall came from something astonishingly simple. After bypassing advanced sensors, defeating alarms, opening one of the world's most secure vaults, and stealing a fortune, the operation began to unravel because of discarded garbage, a half-eaten sandwich, a receipt, and a few pieces of evidence that should never have been left behind. The criminals had beaten the vault, but they couldn't completely beat human error. Epilogue. Leonardo Notarbartolo was ultimately convicted for his role in the heist and sentenced to prison. Several members of the crew were identified, though not all were successfully prosecuted. To this day, the Antwerp Diamond Heist remains a legendary case studied by detectives, security professionals, and criminologists around the world.
It is remembered as a remarkable demonstration of patience, planning, and intelligence, and as proof that even the most carefully crafted criminal masterpiece can collapse because of one small mistake.
The arrest of Leonardo Notarbartolo marked the final chapter in one of the most sophisticated robberies ever committed. For Belgian authorities, solving the case had required years of painstaking investigation, international cooperation, and a fortunate trail of evidence that the thieves had accidentally left behind. By 2005, the legal proceedings had reached their conclusion. After reviewing the evidence gathered by investigators, the court found Leonardo Notarbartolo guilty of orchestrating the Antwerp Diamond Heist. As the mastermind behind the operation, he received a 10-year prison sentence. Several of his accomplices were also identified and prosecuted, receiving various prison terms depending on their involvement in the crime. For law enforcement, the convictions represented a major victory. But for many people, the case was far from over. The biggest mystery remained unanswered. Where were the diamonds? Despite years of investigations, searches, interrogations, and international efforts to trace the stolen property, a substantial portion of the loot was never recovered. Millions of dollars worth of diamonds, gemstones, and jewelry seemed to have vanished without a trace. This disappearance fueled endless speculation. Some investigators believed the diamonds had been quickly sold through international black market networks. Others theorized that the gems had been cut into smaller stones and mixed into legitimate diamond supplies, making them virtually impossible to identify. There were even rumors that hidden caches of diamonds still existed somewhere in Europe, waiting to be discovered. Adding to the mystery were Notarbartolo's controversial claims. He continued to insist that the heist was not simply a robbery, but part of a larger scheme involving influential figures within the diamond trade. According to his version of events, other people had benefited from the operation. However, no conclusive evidence ever emerged to support those allegations. As a result, questions lingered. Were there additional conspirators? Did someone secretly receive the missing diamonds? Or had the thieves simply hidden the loot so effectively that it would never be found? More than 20 years later, those questions remain unanswered. As the years passed, the Antwerp Diamond Heist evolved from a criminal case into a modern legend. Books, documentaries, television programs, and crime researchers examined every aspect of the operation. Security experts studied the methods used by the thieves. Detectives analyzed the investigation that ultimately brought them down. The heist became a classic example of how intelligence and preparation can sometimes overcome even the most advanced security systems. For the Antwerp diamond industry, however, the robbery was a wake-up call. The realization that a small team of criminals had successfully penetrated one of the world's most secure vaults sent shockwaves throughout the industry. Security professionals immediately began reviewing procedures and identifying weaknesses that had been exploited. The response was massive. Access controls became stricter. Surveillance systems became more sophisticated. Background checks were expanded. Security protocols were redesigned to prevent anyone from spending years gathering information from inside the system, as Notarbartolo had done. Advanced monitoring technologies were introduced, and cooperation between security firms, diamond dealers, and law enforcement agencies increased dramatically. The goal was simple: ensure that a heist like this could never happen again. Today, Antwerp's Diamond District is widely regarded as one of the most heavily protected commercial areas in the world. The lessons learned from the robbery fundamentally changed how valuable assets are secured. Yet, despite all the improvements, the story continues to fascinate people. Unlike many famous robberies that relied on violence or intimidation, the Antwerp Diamond Heist was built on patience, planning, and precision. The thieves did not storm the vault with weapons. They spent years studying their target, understanding its defenses, and carefully exploiting weaknesses that nobody else had noticed. That's what makes the case so remarkable.
It demonstrates that security is not just about technology. The strongest locks, the most advanced alarms, and the most sophisticated surveillance systems can still be vulnerable when confronted by determined individuals who are willing to invest years in preparation. At the same time, the story contains an equally important lesson. For all their brilliance, the thieves were ultimately defeated by a simple human mistake. After bypassing sensors, defeating alarms, opening an allegedly impregnable vault, and stealing a fortune, they failed to completely eliminate the evidence linking them to the crime. Their downfall did not come from the vault, it came from carelessness. The Antwerp Diamond Heist therefore remains one of history's most fascinating criminal cases, a story of extraordinary ambition, meticulous planning, and incredible skill, ultimately undone by a few overlooked pieces of garbage. More than 20 years later, the missing diamonds continue to fuel speculation, the mystery continues to captivate investigators, and the heist remains a legendary example of how even the most secure systems can be challenged by human ingenuity.